Hello, everybody. Welcome to this AT webinar with program partners Amtico and SIG, looking at building schools, adapting to growth and change in the community. We have a great program of speakers and a lot to hear from them this morning. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking. I just tell you who the speakers are going to be. They will be Ian Dryden from SIG, uh, Nagar Nihania from Hawkins Brown, Jay Ann from Studio Weave, Sophia Wise from Antico, Gavin Hale-Brown from Henley Hale-Brown Architects, and Sheila O'Donnell from O'Donnell and Toomey. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would just like to remind everybody that we will have a discussion at the end, and that will offer a chance to discuss your questions. And my advice is to send them in when they occur to you, because otherwise we all have a tendency to forget. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm also looking forward to your questions and our discussion. And with no further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, who is Ian Dryden, National Specification Manager for Bituminous Membranes at SIG. Ian.
So today we're going to talk about the working with multi-academy trusts on estate management. The plan here is just to talk about really how we can help money go further, identifying the worst roof areas, and this I would hope will sort of, you can expand it into windows and doors and fire safety systems. So whilst I'm going to talk mainly around the subject of roofing, this can be planned and moved out across an entire estate, across all different sort of problems, and it's something we're developing at SIG to help academies directly or with yourselves, architects and surveyors. So as you can see, I do a lot of schools, and this is some of the worst ones. We've got leaks above school cooking areas, storage areas where they've got hundreds of pounds worth, thousands of pounds worth of books, and this is the dining area of children. So I think we all agree, and I've said it for many years on this with the architecture today, is that we do have an age stock of schools, and it's how we use the money that they get in SCA funding, and how we can make that go further and help the trusts. So my first question is to everyone: would you work in an office like this? And I think we would all answer most definitely not. You can see the staining on the carpet there from the leaking roof, and this is an IT suite in a primary school. This really isn't good. This project was Heathfield Academy, and we worked through this and got this sorted out. But today we're going to talk about Lightcliffe Academy Trust, or Abbey Trust as they're now rebranded. Look, what is a multi-academy trust? They've got to have at least 3,000 pupils. They're generally larger multi-academy trusts, these. So they're getting between 600,000 and there is some of them getting sort of £4.2 million a year to maintain their buildings in various guises. But that is everything to do with maintenance down to the lick of paint on the walls. So yes, it's a lot of money, but they've got to make that money go a long way. And this is where I'm hoping with what I'm going to show you today, we can use this and talk to the estates professionals and use our services as design specialists to sort of find a synergy there to make this money go further and get them correct advice. There's a lot of bad advice out there, or misguided advice, should we say. So yes, we'll move on. So multi-academy trusts, some of the key things I've identified. They're generally not estates professionals. I know that's a bit of a generalisation now. They are getting more estate professionals in there at high levels, but they are generally a caretaker or a teacher, and then an estates professional second. So they rely on correct, good advice, which is what we can all give. They react to issues, as we saw in those previous slides. We saw that there was leaks, and then they will literally pick up the phone, go and yell, or get the yellow pages as used to be, and dial a number, find a roofer, and say, can you come and fix this leak, or go and paint some rubbish on it, charge them an exorbitant amount of money, and it'll leak again in 6 months' time. They're not dealing with the problem. Like you say, they have got they are fully SCA funded, so they get this money every year. So what do we want to do? We want to offer a full roof survey of all roofs and give them a planned idea, so it will look something like this. Now, this is, as I say, this is just for a roof. You could take this and expand this into a much wider estate management program. So we could have one for windows, we could have one for partitions, you could have another one for teaching areas that don't quite work. I mean, I'm working with another trust where they've inherited buildings where the entire open floor is open because they wanted open learning, which sounds really good on paper, until you've got a French class sat next to an English class teaching at the same time, and the French teacher can hear the English teacher. And these are problems that I've come across, and it's how, again, you know, that isn't something that I can get involved with, but it's something that I've identified that, you know, speak to me after this, and we can speak about these trusts and things, and we can work together. I get given all sorts of curveball problems when I'm walking around, and it'd be nice to pass them on to surveyors and architects and say, look, I can put somebody in touch with you who can help solve this issue, who are specialists. So talk through this. It's pretty self-explanatory. As you can see, it works as a traffic light system. So red being the worst areas, amber being the not so bad areas but need doing. And the plan is to get ahead. The red areas, look, they're always going to be failed. They're always going to be big budget figures. These are a bit out of date because of price inflation that we've had. But we update these yearly to this trust. As you can see, you know, we've got the list of the school, what the grade is, and there's a key to that. Life expectancy, the square meterage with budget prices, and then there's a link here, hyperlinked, and there's a full detailed report behind that with pictures proving what we're saying, and then specifications. So we can get this out to tender. So it's really good for the trust. At a glance, they've now got sort of a 5 to 10 year plan of what's going to need doing, along with some budget costs. That budget costs here aren't to replace. They could be budget costs to overlay, or in this case, a 4,000. That's actually, when you go to the link, it's a bit of repair work they really need to do now. But after repairs, they're going to get 10 years out of that roof. You know, at the minute they're going, we've got a leak, and they're paying somebody £1,000 every time they go up to repair it. So again, good advice, correct advice. So I'm going to go into this a bit more detail, with one particular school within that whole element of the trust. So it gets really quite in depth, as you can see. So Lightcliffe Academy, it's part of Abbey Trust. They've changed the name recently, so it makes it a bit more confusing. This is sort of an overview of what we found. So there was multiple roof areas, as you can see. You've got all sorts of up and down areas. You can see from the Google Earth image, it's just all over. Multitudes of different systems. You've got single ply. We've got the old 1B and 1E, or 1B, 2 layers of 1B with some chippings on top. Then we've got a liquid roof here, some torch and felts here. We've got metal sheeting. So we've got a multitude of things going on. It's a very busy area. We've got interfaces between different systems. So all these things that, you know, what do we need to do to get this roof or this school leak free? Now, when I move on, we're sort of into this school. So I've sort of done it a different way and sort of said, look, we've completed these roofs in 2020, we've completed this roof here in 2021. And then we've identified red zone 1, 2, 3. So this again is just showing you the evolution of when we started, and we broke this down into these roofs here were the worst ones. They were rotted through. We had to replace metal decks and all sorts of lots of work there to be done. And this roof here again, it was chipboard that got saturated. So again, we know how much money they've got, and we've got to look at we've got to accept they can't do the whole school. As much as we'd like to spend £1 million, we can't. So what I'm going to talk through is all the red zones we've got going on, and how what this is going to look for. As you say there, it's a 5-year plan. We're 2 years into it. We've done very well, and it's looking good. But we'll just talk through what we're going to do, and it gives an idea. Again, this is all about making the money go further and getting ahead, and that's where we get to the amber zones. We're finally getting ahead. So as you can see, this was work carried out this year. So we've just completed. And all signed off, and nice warranty issued. The school are very happy. And you can see, look, we do core samples on all these roofs. Again, I'm just going to touch on core samples at this point and say, be careful when you're getting somebody to cut a core sample. If they cut a core sample into a newish roof, it could still be under guarantee, and they're going to invalidate that guarantee. So again, question the manufacturer, make sure they understand that, look, this roof's just been done. Don't cut into it. You will invalidate a warranty, or certainly make the claim harder if there is a leak, because if it leaks around that core sample, and nobody guarantees the core samples, you don't have a claim to make against your warranty, and there can be a lot of damage caused by that. So again, it's experience, knowledge. This was an old liquid roof. It wasn't under guarantee. I've done all my checks. So it's a liquid overlay of a felt roof that's failed. That is supposed to be fiberboard, but there's not much of it left. It just got saturated, and then you can just see underneath. I don't know if you can probably see. You've got a metal deck. So it was, very simple solution. And then also we looked at the roof lights. You've got the old glass north lights. They're not really man safe. They're not safe to be near anymore. So again, as you can see, stepping back from that, making sure I'm safe. Key there, making sure I'm safe. So then, you're safe from claims against people falling through a roof light, and things like that. So we identified the issues here, and we've gone with a full torch-on system to put that right. Unfortunately, we don't have any completion photos because of the time frame of finishing to today's presentation. But rest assured, all those roof lights are now lovely, brand new roof lights, and we've got rid of any ones that we didn't need that have been blocked over and things. I would say that that's not always needed. I think we don't have enough natural light in schools. I'm hoping somebody today might be talking about that, a bit more in depth than I am. But yeah, there seems to be this rush away from roof lights because they're seen as a weak point. They don't have to be. If you get the right manufacturers, and there's many of us out there, the roof lights are incorporated with our warranty and our design. Therefore, there's no reason for people to be pulling away from roof lights and going to just pure LED lighting. There's a want and a need there to have natural lighting for teaching. So this is the next phase. So this is next year. This is going to be zones 2 and 3 because we've got enough money, so that's brilliant. Again, it's a full strip. When I did say at the beginning we were catching this late, so we are playing catch up on this school. Again, got another core sample, another load of fiberboard that's failed, but it's a plywood roof. There isn't actually any leaks, would you believe, despite the age of the roof. It's the VCL is actually probably keeping the roof watertight. This is actually degraded really quickly over the last year. This is where updating things all the time. And now we know we need to get sort of this area and this area here done rather quickly. So we've now pulled that into 2023. We're aware of what we're going to do. Again, we're going with the torch and bitumen system. We generally use torch and bitumen systems on schools, especially like this, that the access out onto these to get onto plant areas and things. It's just a more robust product. This large area here that's doing single ply, I would do that back in single ply in a heartbeat. Don't need to be on it. We don't need to do any maintenance. It's got no penetrations. That is a single ply roofer's dream project, and it's got unique shapes in it. It's got curves and things. Single ply sort of lends itself more to them sort of products. So again, we'll look at different products as well. Moving on, and then we get to the point where we can now start saving the trust money. It's quite simple, really. We've got two amber areas, and we're just going to continue to monitor those areas. And you probably saw in that slide earlier on, I think I said sort of 5 or 6 years on these sort of areas. And that could extend out and out and out. We can't give an indefinite time on how long a roof's going to last. We can give a worst case scenario. Experience is something that you'll hear me say, and I've already said a lot in this presentation. There's myself, and there's a lot of good people in the flat roofing industry with years and years of knowledge that we need to engage with and use that knowledge. We are specialists in what we do. We're going to look for that key moment where we're like, right, this is just about getting ready to fail. Let's now overlay it, thermally upgrade it, or we can, with energy costs that go in the way they are, it could be that we thermally upgrade it earlier to save the trust money on heating and things like that. But that we can only tell over a bit more time. So yeah, it's going to be a sort of a time frame of just seeing how we get along with this one. But again, as you can see, we just monitor that, and this is going to be yearly updates. Now as you saw, there was lots of schools on that first slide. We're doing this for every single school. So every year I'll go around, double check my report. Obviously, it's got much quicker now because I've done all my core samples and I've done all the really awkward stuff. And now it's just a walk around. I know what's coming. So now I'm getting to know these roofs very well, better than anyone in the trust is going to know them. But it's great. It's reassuring for the trust that they pick up the phone to Ian, or in your cases, pick up the phone to your practices, your businesses, and allow you to become that trusted person who will probably engage with someone like myself, and hopefully myself, to do this. And we will work as a partnership. Everything I do goes to you. We'll brand it as yourself, so when it goes into the trust, it's all branded you, and there'll be a little logo there, as there is with any manufacturer, just saying we're doing some of the background work. And this is all done on trust, and we work together as a partnership. And that is the key with this. As I say to all the trusts, as I say to yourselves, this is developing a partnership with a trust. This is a client that you will build a relationship with over for many years. And I'm sort of showing here, look, again, I'm concentrating on roofs, but if you use your imagination, if we did this for windows and doors and fire systems and things like that, alarm systems that all have a limited lifespan, we can plan this. And hopefully, as you say, it's took us 5 years to get ahead with this trust, but now we're ahead. I'm going to reduce their costs massively. So the pain has been taken by this trust, and now they're going to benefit through quite a number of savings. This area one, it's probably 1,000 square meters. They're going to probably half their budget spend on that by overlaying it rather than stripping it. So a lot of saving, and the health and safety practices much less. You've got all sorts of things there that can be benefited from. So look, this sort of gives you an idea now. I'm just going to go through it all. So what have we got? They've got a trusted advisor, continuous monitoring, as I say, since 2017 when I've been working for them. As you can see, the green zones all completed, and then obviously we're looking forward to overlay of classrooms. So it's going well. And so these green areas that have been completed here, this is quite new. This is the one where I said they need to spend a few £1,000s on repairs. And funny enough, it's this junction here where we actually did it with this roofing works. This junction here and this interface here, and it's systems that aren't compatible, but we've got details that can overcome that issue. They were just detailed incorrectly. Incorrectly, we'll use that word. Okay, meet the designer, what to consider. So what do I consider when I'm going through all this? As you can see, we've got single ply, we've got sheeting and cladding, we've got the bitumen systems. So we've got a multitude of things that we can use. So the approach is, look, it's very simple. We've talked there about managing the roof design process. So we've managed that. We'll manage the product selection to make sure that it's right. And then we'll manage site process, so the on-site monitoring of that installation to make sure it goes and has been installed correctly. We should give then a genuine guarantee at the end, because we don't want to guarantee something. No manufacturer wants to guarantee something that is going to fail. If we do the first three things correctly, so we have the right product in the right place, we've designed it correctly, and we've monitored the installation, the guarantee then means something. Of course, this said, as we're recording this a couple of days late, because someone hadn't maintained their roof, and I got an urgent phone call to go out onto the roof because it was leaking, where I found 3 blocked outlets, and across a 200 square meters of roof, about 8 inches of water, and had to sort of explain to the trust that they hadn't been maintaining the roof, and so it technically isn't covered in the guarantee. But I put my waders on and waded into this water and unblocked the outlets for them. And they're now going to get the maintenance in place. Look, again, that's another story for another day. Planned roof maintenance and things like that. And that would be covered in our CPDs. We've got many CPDs. And we talk about, in the roof refurbishment CPD, about maintenance. We talk about the importance of maintaining your school roofs to maintain a warranty. And that's everything. I hope you've all enjoyed that and learned something. And I'll hand over to the next presenter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. I was particularly interested in that point, which I suppose should be obvious, but I bet isn't. Don't take a core sample in a roof that's under guarantee. And also, and I think this might give us some food for discussion later on, when you talk about incompatible junctions that you have to deal with, there's a warning when extending a building not to create those junctions. Anyway, as I said, there'll be lots to talk about later, and I would just remind everyone to keep sending your questions in as they occur to you. But now we're moving on to our next speaker, who is Negar Mihania, who is Associate Director for the Education and Research. So she's Associate Director and Education and Research Sector Lead at Hawkins-Brown. Negar.
Hello, pleasure to be here today. I'm an Associate Director at Hawkins-Brown and one of the sector leads responsible for education and research at the practice. Going to be talking today about a project which is very close to my heart, Central Foundation Boys School. I started working on it back in 2010 when I first joined the practice, and 12 years on, we're almost at the end of our work, having delivered several phases of the school's master plan. The school sits as part of a very diverse portfolio of education work at Hawkins-Brown. We particularly enjoy projects which allow us to take a creative approach to a constrained site, or one which needs to unlock unusual funding parameters, both of which have been particularly key at Central Foundation. So to start with the project vision, to build a bigger and better school to allow future generations to remain on site, to breathe new life into old buildings while also addressing the urgent need for specialist facilities in science and sport, to improve accessibility across the whole site, and finally to help the school address a shortfall in funding for the project. There are two parts to this. Firstly, by working with external funding partners like the DFE and local education authority, but also by bringing forward an enabling development on the site. For those that know Old Street, it's in East London, just behind Old Street Roundabout is where our site is. Area's undergone huge transformation since we started working on the project. And the school itself occupies 7 buildings set around a central courtyard. And amongst its stock are some fantastic, really unusual assets. The school first occupied the site in the late 1800s, and over the subsequent 150 years, additional buildings were acquired and repurposed into education use, including a former county court building, I think it's noted as a technical college on the plan, and a tabernacle chapel and Sunday school annex. When we started our work, many of the buildings were in a really poor condition. In fact, the DFE identified 2 of the buildings as amongst the 200 worst education buildings in the country. We had basketball being played in the upper level of a chapel. We had science classrooms split across 4 different buildings, and we had no dedicated sports facilities which met current standards. But what we did have was a site with huge potential and the bones of some really beautiful buildings, including 2 which are Grade 2 listed. We have curtilage listings, as well as a designated heritage asset, all set within a conservation area. We also had and still have a very inspiring head teacher, Mr. Brownhill, who was determined that his pupils deserved better. Over several years, we worked very closely with the school to support numerous funding applications, and this work culminated in a planning application being submitted in 2017, detailing a full master plan for the whole site and all the buildings. Here are some of the key moves which drove the master plan, but in essence, it needed to be affordable, needed to be deliverable while the school remained in full occupation, and designed to be progressed in phases so that it could grow and contract as different funding streams became available. One of the most challenging parts of the master plan was the need for a new 3-court sports hall. It's a really large space, about 20 metres by 30 metres and very tall, which on a site that's so constrained was a really large building block to manoeuvre. So the location of the sports hall went through quite a lot of testing and scrutiny. And the solution we came to was to bury it in the middle of the central courtyard, very carefully nestled between the listed building and the chapel. Refurbished spaces in Block A are then used as changing rooms to minimise the extent of the dig that we needed for the sports hall. And in terms of the other buildings, the 1960s building Block B was replaced to provide purpose-built science laboratories. The chapel was refurbished for creative arts, and a new commercial enabling development was planned to the east as part of the funding mix to support the school works. The master plan was also supported by quite a lot of early work to understand the scale and grain of the local conservation area. I'll flick through some of the studies we did quickly. We wanted our interventions to be contextual, but also mark a new era in the school's occupation of the site and give something back to the local community with investment in new high quality buildings. The first phase of the project is the new science building, Block B, and extensive refurbishment of Block C to consolidate humanities. Photos here, firstly of the existing 1960s Block B. It was significantly compromised when the residential building next door was built, blocking out daylight to many of the classrooms you can see in the middle here. Given the building's already constrained by existing context on 3 sides, it left a really constrained plot. In addition, we needed to mitigate level changes across the site, particularly around this area. We have Block A to the east, which is listed and has no lift, and Block C that we're trying to connect to the south. Block C was particularly complex. So here are the plans of the floors. This building alone has over 17 level changes. So a real minefield of levels across all the buildings to try and unpick. So by strategically locating a new building on the corner plot here with a split access lift, and then combining this with some carefully planned raised access floors through the length of the humanities building, we managed to connect all the buildings to the west, allowing for the first time people to move horizontally across the site without needing to come in and out of every building individually. And here are some photos of the first phase, which was completed in 2020. The Cowper Street and courtyard elevations of the new science buildings. They sit in very different contexts, so have a different language and materiality expressed. Some internal views of the circulation spaces and new science labs in Block B. These, I have to say, proved particularly resilient during COVID, the wide corridors, the generous floor-to-ceiling heights. And the new bridge link was built to connect old and new. You can see nestled in here to support more intuitive wayfinding. And finally, we absolutely loved working with all the heritage features, which were refurbished and repaired throughout, including all the glazed brick, which is left exposed. So on to the second phase, which is currently on site and due to complete next summer. The new sports hall buried in the courtyard, works to Block A and conversion of the tabernacle. The sports hall dig is the major bit of infrastructure work that we're doing to the site, and it also ties into the replacement of the chapel's existing north elevations, which you can see a photo of top right. These were almost entirely solid brick elevations, we think later additions to the chapel. And a bit like Block B, the sports hall has its own role in unlocking accessibility across the site. Top of the sports hall is set about 1.5 meters above the existing courtyard to tie in with the raised ground floor of all the buildings it will connect into. This means that the one new lift plan for the sports hall can also serve 3 existing buildings. Some photos of the tabernacle chapel before we started work. You can see the basketball pitch there and the classrooms below it. And the current state of the chapel, exposed trusses. You can see the real character and grain of the space for the first time in many decades. A view of the courtyard with the raised roof of the sports hall. This has been delivered as a top-down dig because of the very constrained nature of the site. You can also see here the existing chapel facades now being removed and replaced so that we can bring daylight into the new Creative Arts Centre. And here you're 12 meters below ground in the middle of the courtyard in the sports hall. There are large, generous roof lights to bring daylight down into the space. You can see some of them here. And you can see on the right some of the heavy engineering works just a few meters away from one of the listed buildings. And this is a visual standing on the roof of the new sports hall when the works are complete. You can see what the new chapel facade will look like on the left. You can see the roof lights down into the sports hall, integrated into the landscape. This becomes much needed play space for the school. And ahead of you, you can see the Block B and C elevations, which were completed as part of phase 1. We're really excited to be nearing completion of the project, and having worked with the school for well over a decade now, we've built a strong relationship with staff and students, and there's been really great mutual learning on both sides. We've loved having work experience students and even apprentices from the school in the studio with us. Personally, perhaps I've enjoyed less having to give whole school assemblies to 1,000 secondary school boys, quite an intimidating task. But most recently, the school have been helping us with an in-house research project, which I'm supervising, which is how can we design spaces to encourage more inclusivity and diversity. At Central Foundation, you have seen that many of the master plan decisions were guided by measures to improve physical accessibility, but there is a much broader question here about diversity, equality and inclusion, about what role, if any, architects can play in shaping the built environment. And you can see some images here. There's some very obvious links in the higher education sector in particular. What's now widely understood is the magnitude of the issue, attainment gaps, disparity in dropout rates, and the impact on the student experience. But what's less researched is how we can equip ourselves with better tools to ensure the way we design spaces isn't compounding the issue. So we're currently in the process of working with a focus group at the school, as well as a number of other higher education institutes, to look at the issue through a number of lenses: taste, function, and spatial comfort. And it's worth saying that while we recognise the issues are really large, societal and extremely complex, I think it is important to start the dialogue and take a step back to understand the issues better. If we can design buildings to be more inclusive and welcoming for all, we'll be better representing the societies that we serve. Research is still at a very early stage, so if you'd like to find out more or get involved, please don't hesitate to get in touch. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to any questions at the end.
Thank you very much. I was fascinated by the research project at the end, and also by that mix of ambition and pragmatism, having to produce a master plan that looked not only at phasing the work, but also at phasing it depending on how much finance there was and when it came in. Lots to talk about later. Just remind everyone to please send in your questions. And we will now move on to our next speaker, who is Jay Ahn, who is co-founder of Studio Weave.
Thank you for the invitation today. I will talk about our work with the Belvoir School. The Belvoir School is in Ealing in West London. As you can see on this image, it's right next to the A40. And the fortunate situation was that they were given the access to the forest on the south side of the school and via highway authority, and they were seeking to how they can use this forest better and how they can give better learning experience for their students who have special needs. This is special needs secondary school. So they got in touch with us after studying the landscape, and with the council, they thought they might have some kind of temporary structure built in the edge of the building. This site is actually in the Greenbelt, so the development is limited and as is protected land. And when we started having conversation with them, it became apparent that their ambition was much higher than the just temporary porta cabins. And we started developing and fundraising to have a special the forest classroom that is aiding the use of this forest. And the relationship between the school itself has been built over many decades and sprawling out, and the relationship with a new access to the forest became quite apparently important for them to really cherish and explore further. So how we started the project really is to get to know our client, that every student and the staff, and including the management staff, were our client, and that we got to know them through workshops and conversations and finding out what they do like and what they dislike about their current buildings. And this process lasted about 6 to 8 months, which we spent quite a long time understanding their needs as an overall school. And various workshops with students has happened just to understand and give experience and give a chance to these students that how the process of making their home, the school, actually works. Interestingly, by the time this project would have built back then, most of students would have graduated, but they still kept quite a strong link with the school even there after their graduation. And probably because it was a special needs school, it had quite a strong link to the communities, and there was quite a lot of interest beyond the school boundary and beyond the staff and the students. And through the conversations and the workshops, we starting to developing sketches. And majority of these sketches that I'm showing today is actually happened during the workshop. While we're having conversations, started developing what are the differences of different way of delivering the building. And the functionality wise, it came to the three key elements. That is cozy lounge, which is like your living room, like at home, domestic, have a fireplace, sofas, and another one is sociable kitchen. School wanted to develop a curriculum that students learn how to cook and how to work with the domestic environment of the kitchen. And then in between, really important part of rural life, which is messy barn. This is a transitional point that you actually go into the forest, and also coming out from the forest, that you can put your muck away, your wellies and your tools and other elements with a big sink, so you can clean those things away. And this was a diagram that we came out with, and as you can see, the building becomes a gatehouse into the forest. Because it was quite magical space for them, they wanted this building to be part of the forest and working with the landscape. So after that, we go through the technical development of the building itself, and we stuck to the concept quite faithfully. And as you can see, the form and its shape has been developed really close alongside to our concept. And the result, again, was very close to what we have presented and developed together with the school during the workshops. The project had to happen. It had to be constructed during the school hours, and there were some holidays, but we had to make sure that all the working is incredibly safe, to make sure the students and the construction site does not have conflict. But at the same time, we wanted to open up the process to the students and staff to see what it takes to build a structure like this. And because this site was in Greenbelt, we had to use a lot of prefabrications to come in, and a lot of sustainable materials that is sourced very carefully. And for example, all the foundation is the steel piles that can be removed when the building's life is finally came to the end, so that the landscape can go back to its original state. Interestingly, just looking back to the construction photos, it was a very rainy season, a whole 6 to 7 months or so that the building was going up, a lot of rainy days. So there was quite a bit of a challenge putting the frames up. Quite an interesting stories about getting this curved glue lamps together. Because of the limit of the budget, we couldn't really commission a new jig to be built. So we found a company with a pre-existing a jig for the curvature that we actually utilized. That we changed the form slightly of the building to match those elements. A lot of stories came out in that. We had a really good relationship with the contractor who loved working there, except too many rainy days. But the build process became quite smooth, and finally the buildings were built to our drawings, actually. The working with the craft people of the contractors, that we had a quite successful period of time of construction period. And because this was for the special school, the contractors were very attentive on all the details. A lot of suggestions came out through the conversations and how buildings was going to be built. The while students can look at it. This is the building before it had haircut. As you can see, the cladding is coming out at the top. It is just about to go through the cutting And results, the client and students were very happy to see this come together, and finally we get some sunshine. This building, probably the most used building in the school, I've been told. It's the messy barn is messy. A lot of artwork is going on, and students working within the kitchen, and cozy living room has been working incredibly smoothly. And these are some photographs of the results. We really wanted to build a building and design a building with them that is memorable for them. Their school life is quite a short period of time in their life, but it's a very formidable year. So we wanted them to carry the memories of their school life quite a long way into their life. So hopefully the students who graduated now a long time ago, they remember this process and using this space when they were completed. And this, the front porch of the messy barn also act as the mini theatre. So they do the small performances and things like that. That is open wide up to the forest. So next, I will spend the few minutes how our relationship evolved with the school to develop their main school itself. As you can see in this photograph, the building has been developed over decades of period of time, ad hoc addition, and quite a few elements became quite tired and required rejuvenation, especially the specialist teaching elements, theatres, music, science blocks, and those elements. And one of the biggest challenge of this project was that the school had to be constructed about a third or even 50% of its own capacity increase during the school operation hours. So the construction sequence and the demolition and how the project came about had to be really carefully orchestrated to dance around the school's curriculum, so it doesn't impede on a student's day-to-day life. So what we have came out with is demolition actually happens after, but utilizing the on the left-hand side, you can see that's actually the western corner of the site, and by completing that corner, almost the building becomes a large courtyard that is working with the forest on the south side. And we came up with this concept. We worked up to stage 2, and it was handed over to. So we worked up to stage 2 with the school, and then with a consultation with the council, it was handed over to the council, went through the construction as a design and build process with a contractor, and the contractor's executive architect, Rob Townsend, was employed to carry through the design of the details and the construction. And we have provided all the spatial sequences and the overall look and feel of how this building should be composed together. Each significant rooms has been laid out and drawn out in agreement with the school. Again, all this process, we worked with a school very closely, what they're looking for their future schools. And it has been finally delivered after several years, now starting a conversation, and it's now very well used, the large element of the school, and we're very proud of. Thank you for listening today, and I hope we have a great discussion today.
I hope we have a great discussion too. There's plenty to talk about. I have visited that school at the stage when the Forest School building was complete, and I remember not only how lovely that was and how enthusiastic the head teacher was, but just how grim the rest of the school buildings felt. Anyway, do keep your questions coming in. I'm now happy to move on to our next speaker, who is Sophia Wise, who is Regional Commercial Manager at Amtico Flooring. Over to you, Sophia.
We've seen some great examples of the importance of considered design here today, and I'm here to talk to you about how choosing the right surface finish can really help contribute to the success of a space, using some of our case studies as examples. So why do we believe the choice of surface finishes are so important? Surface decoration may seem nice to have, soft, fluffy, but in reality, the combination of colours, patterns and surface textures alongside lighting can really make or break a scheme. These finishing touches can help illustrate a design and form an integral part of answering the needs of a space. Let's start with colour. We're all familiar with our often trotted out basic concepts of colour psychology. You use pale blues and greens for calming environments, vibrant shades for encouraging energy, and so on. But it goes much further than that. How can we influence mood with colour? The environment and the function of a space will determine this, i.e., how the user interacts with their surroundings based on what is represented to them. In every school, college or university, there are a variety of spaces to design for, each with a very different function or purpose. Colour and pattern can be put to good use in influencing mood. Brightly coloured floors, walls or furniture for communal areas or collaborative working spaces, like the image on the left, or gentler, more muted tones to promote focus and quiet spaces for learning, like the central image. Colour isn't just aesthetic. When used in conjunction with lighting, it does bring into practical considerations that affect the accessibility and the use of the area and the well-being of the user. As we know, newly designed educational spaces are meticulously planned to take advantage of natural light and incorporate outside space wherever possible. So there's plenty of opportunity to design the interior around this. Natural light either creating calm area spaces in classrooms or helping bright colours to pop. But what about refurbishment projects that have to take into account old building stock that doesn't have this flexibility? This is where the considered choices of surfaces such as flooring can make a massive difference. Simple, clean schemes in lighter but practical colours can be combined with lighting to mimic natural daylight where it's not naturally available. It can promote clarity and focus for task areas such as classrooms. We're all aware of the studies that show a drop in productivity where there is added stress on workers in poorly lit or loud looking or sounding environments. And these are equally applicable to education, highlighting the fact that there are lower levels of engagement and poorer quality of learning in these environments. Pattern light colour plays a similar role in the way it influences spaces. And that's because we know colour and pattern go hand in hand. Pattern can be as simple and subtle or bold and complicated as you need it to be, depending on the rest of the scheme. People can associate pattern with specific environments and they give off a particular impression. I'm sure you'll all remember your school's main assembly hall having a traditional, well-worn wood parquet floor. And here at 74 Designed Hox House, they've taken a classic large parquet pattern and updated it using an ink-washed blue wood and combined it with traditional patterns like tartan and houndstooth to create a real mix of heritage meets modern. Zoning and wayfinding are obvious use for pattern and colour, regardless of surface, as well as indicating what a space is for, how to get there and so on. It can also provide a sense of safety and reassurance, a quiet space for an overwhelmed child, helping students get to where they need to be quickly in large buildings, or simply knowing that this is their space. Here at Clothworkers South Building at Leeds Uni, a riot of colour, as we can see. The brief to Farrell and Clark was to help the design school students navigate their way around their old building in a way that reflected their creativity. It's been done here by incorporating different colours for each floor into a seamless directional pattern. Pattern and colour can be used to stamp identity on spaces as well. School crests and entrances, different colours for different floors, departments or year groups to create a sense of inclusivity or belonging, which in turn supports the user. Here you can see a project with Heriot-Watt University in Scotland, where the brief was to reflect the university's long-standing support of their LGBTQ student community in one of the cafe areas. We worked with the university team to create a scheme that used a mix of feature and feel tiles using our signature LVT range. The concrete offsets the brights perfectly and helps to frame the zoned featured areas. So that's a quick run through of aesthetics, but what about product performance? Again, like colour and pattern, certain performance attributes have a direct bearing on the type of surface finish specified. Any surface that absorbs sound or reduces sound transmission between floors can only be of benefit in a multi-occupancy space. It reduces noise pollution and the associated stress that comes with it. Similarly, floors that offer improved slip resistance can provide an additional practical benefit for high traffic spaces like corridors and canteens. And as you can see here, doesn't need to have that typically institutional safety floor appearance. And then there's hygiene. Clearly an important consideration traditionally, this has been taken a whole new meaning in the last couple of years. Choosing surface finishes with inbuilt antimicrobial and antiviral gives both specifiers and users the confidence that they are in a space that is safe to be in. And finally, what about durability? It's all very well designing beautiful spaces, but they have to perform in terms of longevity. Specifying a product with a long shelf life will obviously be of benefit to those maintaining the buildings and help towards the long-term sustainability of it as well. Here you can see the before and after shots of the Royal Academy of Music in London. After 28 years, the Amtico floor installed was still in perfect condition. However, the subfloor had begun to crumble, making refurbishment unavoidable. So to keep the overall look and feel the same, an updated version of the original floor was specified and laid over the new subfloor. If it hadn't failed, the original floor would have been kept for as long as needed. As well as making floors that last the test of time, here at Amtico, responsible, sustainable manufacturing is something we've been committed to for years. As well as making sure all our floors achieve and exceed standards such as M1 and Indoor Air Quality Gold, we're always looking to support our people in improving our processes and products. In terms of pre-production, we have a sustainable supply chain, customer audited ethical trading policy, and a commitment to using phthalate-free products, recycled glass beads, and bio-based plasticizer. At our manufacturing site here in Coventry, we have complete control over our raw materials, our waste management and recycling. Almost all our production waste can be recycled back into product where we can, and where it can't, it's sent to a UK firm that make things like traffic cones and speed bumps. Our scope 1 and 2 emissions are offset, and we're working quickly towards achieving our scope 3. Wherever possible, we aim to work with only other similarly certified suppliers, and we'll even open up our factory so you can see exactly what goes on. We love a challenge, especially if it's one of your challenges, and we will work with you on everything from bespoke schemes and sampling solutions through to on-site technical and aftercare support. If it's important to you, it's important to us, and we pride ourselves on being more than just a manufacturer. Collaboration and trust remain at the heart of all of our customer relationships. And on that note, I'll finish. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that, Sophia. I think it's always fascinating to hear someone talking about just one aspect of the building and realizing how much there is to think about there. And I loved both the use of colour for wayfinding, because I always get lost in tall buildings, and on the other hand, doing replacements where you could hardly see what had been done at all. Lots of food for thought. Please keep sending your questions in. And we are now moving on to our fifth speaker, who is Gavin Hale-Brown, who is Director of Henley Hale-Brown Architects. Over to you, Gavin.
Thank you. For those who don't know us, we're Henley Hale-Brown. We're not education specialists. We work across lots of different building types, which we think makes everything richer. So we do work with everything from community housing, co-housing, to quite large office buildings, to hotels, and we do a lot of work with existing buildings. But we think the mix allows us to produce buildings which inform each other. So today we're talking about Hackney New School, This is the primary school. So Hackney School is actually based on the A10, which comes out of London. It leaves London Bridge and ends up at King's Lynn, an old Roman road called Ermine Street. We are at a junction of the Regent's Canal and a basin called Kingsland Basin. Here we already built one school, and the primary school we're talking about is an extension, an addition to that rather than an extension. Location-wise, we are right on the edge of a big chunk of very nice sort of inner city suburban London, set out from an estate owned by the Benyons, who already own the land, basically everything in this shot east of the main road there. And they've been partners within the scheme because they own some of the covenants within this, which control the development of the site. The site was an old fire station. The fire station was built in 1895. This is a picture of 1904, and you can see actually it was quite a large building. It was eventually demolished and replaced by not such a large building in 1975. And the site for this, actually, as you can see, is a significant site. Now, this was closed when the LFCDA were actually having to raise money, and became an open market site. So something that the client had to bid for. We're close to a railway track here, one of the new overground lines. So we've got a really good P-tail rating, and buildings have been going up, increasing the height of the area, and the site to our north will go up as well. So we had our two buildings. This is the first phase. So this is Hackney New School. They're both designed with the same ethos, which is based on music and extended day. And then this is the new primary school we're going to talk about today. The two buildings are across the road. The massing is slightly different because the new school, which was built first, is this building. The idea of the free school came with a sponsor, and the sponsor's idea was based on two schools which they knew about. The New School for Social Research in Columbia, which was dedicated to a sort of academic freedom and intellectual inquiry, and that's what they were very interested in developing in East London. And the New College at Hackney, which was a sort of a dissenting academy set up in 1786, which actually didn't last long because it was too dissenting. So this was the first building. This was the new school. This was built 10 years ago, and had a temporary primary school within it. So our site for the primary school, as I said, is here on Downham Road. This is the busy Kingdom Road, the A10 we looked at previously. And the massing of the building is set up so the tower, which obviously funds the scheme, is closest to the main road and acts as a noise and pollution filter for the school. It also helps us with overheating because it blocks out the morning sunlight, which obviously for a school is where a lot of the overheating comes from. So as the children come to school, the building hasn't heated up, which is something which can be a significant problem in school buildings. And then obviously it allows us to step down the buildings towards the sort of inner city suburban buildings of the de Beauvoir estate. And this is how it's manifested itself. We've got a tower which is 11 stories. It's 100% affordable. And then tucked behind it is the school. So in this view, you can't even see the primary school. You can see the high school and how they connect together. The ground floor of the building is commercial. It's 68 affordable units, and it's obviously fully let. Coming more specifically onto the school, then all the buildings are maximising the site. So we've got a site where the old fire station site was fairly large, but actually by pushing everything to the edge of the site, it allows us to get maximum use out of the land. The plan of the tower itself has got a centralised core, minimal corridors. The plan of the school has all external corridors, so we've got no circulation space eating up any of our net to gross. I'll whiz you quickly through the plans because time is limited. So on the ground floor, we enter the school through some big gates and come into the courtyard. And then the arrangement of the school is at ground level we have early years and a hall and some service buildings. And at the ground floor of the tower, we have bikes for the kids, bikes for the staff, and support and admin staff. So during the day, when these gates get closed, you have access, a secured access into the school. And then running around a colonnade, we also have an access to the residential block and a commercial 2-storey unit, which is owned by part of the development team. As you then move up through the building, all the classrooms wrap around the courtyard. So we do have, on the first storey, we have years 2, 3, 4 and 5, and the double height hall pushing through. And we move up to the second floor, where we have years 5 and 6 in their sort of the hierarchy of the space, but everyone can always perceive where they're moving through the school. And then right at the top, we have a roof garden which is planted with box schemes, which change every year, and the children do some sort of city farming. So I'll quickly look at the tower. The tower is all the buildings are made from the same material. So we're a deep red. Some people call it terracotta. Some people describe this building as pink. I'm not sure it's really pink, but its colour comes from the aggregate, and it comes from the sand within the brick. So it's not a dyed building. It's something which is always going to look like this. All the units have over generous external space, well protected, well shaded, and at the ground floor we have our colonnade. And here you can see the richness of the colours that have come out from using those quite base materials. And then within the units, as you go up the building, you get these fantastic views, basically straight down Ermine Street, back down to London, and you can see the height of the city. We are the tallest building between the city and Dalston, up until you get to Dalston Junction, for those who know where that is. Internally, the circulation is really kept quite together, so we've got a very dense core. It wraps up, and it's 11 stories, so people maybe aren't going to walk all the way, but it's designed as to be a nice space, top lit, naturally ventilated, but the circulation wraps around that, so people can actually, per floor, communicate. That pops out at the top into a lantern light. That takes the natural ventilation through to the roof, and then onto a communal roof garden, which is used by everybody. Then back at ground floor, our colonnade protects and gives access to the entrance to the school, which you see at the end, but also bikes and administration, and then the entrance to the flats and the commercials. So everything is quite tight together, giving us quite a protected social space to be in. And your eye is led from the main road to the entrance of the school, undercover if needs be. The design is quite monumental. It's intentionally civic. These are very, very high, a very high arcade. It's been in place for some time now. It seems to be well treated. It seems to be well looked after. The materials are inherently, we think, beautiful. The procurement was unusual. It's a very complex client of JV with the Education Funding Authority and the developer and the Benyon Estate and the free school. So there are a lot of people involved, and the procurement was actually done with the contractor, the developer as contractor, so behaviour management contractor. So we worked very closely with the design subcontractors as well. Here's one of the project architects. This is John. For scale, John is about 6'5", so it is actually quite a big piece of concrete. So this colonnade runs down to the school, to the entrance. We produce both the colonnade and the facade of the building produces places where you can sit and interact. And so we create a long bench here, which seems to work very well for people. So it's south facing, so naturally people tend to sit there and chat, and creates a social structure for the school. Similarly, as you enter the school, the gates open. There's a very large welcoming gate. This obviously then gets closed once the school is open, but quite a social way of entering. No one's being forced through a small gate. The gates were designed with Paul Morrison, specifically for the school. And when they close, they reinforce this idea of a cloistered education area for the school, and actually produce really nice shadows as well. So then you move through, you can see the courtyard, which is well lit in the distance. And that's where all the parents then can deliver their children to to the classrooms. All the classrooms act as storefronts, so each class has its dedicated entrance, and the early years obviously use those actually as literally storefronts where they play games. And you can see here the idea of having no internal corridors allows us to have maximum footprint for the school and external circulation throughout. This is some of the teachers of early years kids, and they open these windows and play through them. You can see from here that the materials are very simple. They're robust, they're glazed brick, they're neutral colours, zinc roofing, things which will last, things which will need very little maintenance over the years. And then going up, you can see the hall open to the courtyard at the base, and then up to this is the years 5 and 6 higher above. This is at the far end of the building. We have smaller intimate areas. This is in front of the years 2 and 3, looking back into the hall. And then the vertical circulation, which takes you up between the levels and eventually up to the planted roof garden, which gives the children the area to plant and to play. That's where they do a lot of water play. And these are natural ventilation ducts which come up from the main hall. As I said, the materials are simple, fairly neutral, robust. And then the classrooms are all naturally ventilated. It performed really well in the heat waves. They carried on teaching as normal. It wasn't something where other schools in Hackney did close, but because they have natural ventilation, they've got big overhangs, they simply didn't overheat. And the 2 rooms, there's 2 rooms, it's a 2-form entry school, the 2 rooms can be linked to do classroom teaching. There's only 25 pupils per class. The type plan allowed us to produce other spaces like music practice room, because every child is given the opportunity to follow a curriculum of music in this school. And then a multi-purpose hall with these stripes of the natural ventilation which go up through the roof, which is used for performance, teaching, dining and family dining as well. The school overall performs very well. The energy requirements are very low. It's net positive from the calculations, and it's in use. And the buildings are built to last. So hopefully these buildings are things which are, apart from the windows, which will need over time will need some maintenance, the rest of the building should actually be there for 100 years. We would hope. And I'll finish on the last slide, which is this was done by one of the parents. An idea of how they see the school, and it was sent to all the children saying, how would you like to be in this? How would you like to be in this school? We don't have octopuses, but it does engender a certain amount of joy, which comes back every time we go there. So we're very pleased with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There were so many interesting things to see there. In particular, I think I liked the way that you dealt with the ground floor of the residential building. Nobody ever knows what to do with it. And I thought the way that you brought part of it into use for the school was incredibly. I was also fascinated by the fact that you actually used your building to overshadow the school. I think it's time for us all to go back to primary school and have some fun. But before we talk about that, do please keep your questions coming in. And I'm going to hand over now to our final speaker, who is Sheila O'Donnell, who is founding director of O'Donnell and Toomey. Sheila.
So we've designed quite a few schools during our career, but the one I'm going to talk about today, St. Angela's College in Cork, is a project that's particularly special to me, partly because of the large number of challenges involved, and partly because it took so long to do, which you'll see on the dates on that slide, that we worked on this project from 1999 to 2016. This photograph is standing on the street outside St. Angela's College. The school is to the right behind that reddish sandstone wall, looking down the most amazing steep hill towards the centre of the city of Cork. So that gives you a sense of one of the challenges, which is this gradient on the site. This photograph is taken after the building is finished, seen from the west, looking across the city at the combination of the old and the new buildings. Our new buildings are the ones in the middle here, and they sit between and around a series of existing historic buildings which we retained. So it was a project that combined old and new. It's a kind of reuse retrofit project, but it's also a project that deals with a remarkable site level change, and also with some very interesting historic conditions on the site. The gardens to the left at the top of the green part of this photo is the school site. There were quite nice Victorian gardens, and then the building got denser and denser as you went down to the south. This gives you some sense of the hill and the level that the ground on the site steps and steps and steps down to the south. And there is only one way of entering the site, which is from the street to the top of this picture, and the entrance is through a narrow 3 meter wide gap here. So otherwise, because of the levels, there's no way into this site from the surrounding streets. So to set the context, the grey buildings are the existing buildings on the site. There were a lot of buildings, some of them historic, some of them prefab, some of them sheds, which housed the existing school, which has been running on this site for more than 100 years. So it's the sort of location situation of St. Angela's in that part of Cork was part of the ethos of the school and what we were asked to respond to. This rather basic section drawing, which we made early on, which is a survey drawing, just gives a sense of the relationship of the levels within the existing buildings, that the rooms and the buildings on the left are below the ground floor. The roof of the building on the left is below the ground floor of the building on the right. So it was an 18 meter level change from the top of the hill to the bottom. And of course, the other, this is a kind of weird picture. It's a picture of the brief, but I find it quite interesting to do this. And in a sense, I think if you're thinking about the challenge of this project, it's how to take a piece of city like the one I've just showed you with some existing buildings with particular relationships, and then how to take a schedule of accommodation, which the Department of Education gave us, and to somehow accommodate that within those conditions. And I think one thing you would notice, the orange elements are the things that are completely new to this school. The one on the right-hand side is the orange, is the sports hall, which is a very big space. And there's a smaller hall on the left, also in orange. And then there are other rooms that have very particular requirements. And so finding a place on this incredibly crowded site to put something as big as that sports hall was, in a sense, the kind of starting challenge. So what we realized early on was that we had to demolish some buildings, a small number, most of them were the prefabs and the sheds, but sometimes there were the outbuildings and the attachments, in order to connect the whole site from top to bottom with new buildings and old working together and with landscape. So this diagram is about identifying potential site for building, which meant demolishing the hatched buildings, which were in all cases of secondary value. In fact, we in the end, we retained the one on the right, which is the lodge to the school, which further enhanced the problem of access to the site. So having taken away those buildings, the strategy was to keep the 3 grey buildings, high school, main house, convent, and then to thread the art wing to the north and the science wing to the south. And the science wing is incorporated into the sports hall, which is at the lowest level of the site, with gardens and ball court on its roof. And this section sketch, which I made very early, was to say that as well as dealing with how to access and how to move around the site with this steepness, we also made a decision early on that we wanted all of the outdoor spaces, and there are many on the site, to be connected externally, so that when the school was finished, you could walk from the convent orchard on the left right down to the hard space outside the PE hall on the right without going inside. Because that was the nature of the existing building, was about old buildings and how they open to each other. And of course, the corollary of that is that you must be able to walk inside without going outside through all the internal accommodation. And the materials of the existing buildings and of our building are really interesting, very Cork character, Cork sandstone, which is very red, Cork limestone, which is very white, brick and timber. And this is a view of the finished school from the street on the west side, which is Richmond Hill, showing how there is no access to the building from this side. I mean, the level of the playground and of the activity is up at this level here. So it's a kind of amazing, it's like a castle, it's a landlocked building. And I'm now rotating around, I've moved around to the south, so you're just looking at that side there. Now we're looking from the south up the hill at the relationship between the historic building here and our new buildings and the PE hall with the girls playing in the outdoor space on its roof. So, I mean, it really was a hill town. It's a kind of school as hill town in the city. And this model gives you a sense of the scale of the existing buildings that on Patrick's Hill, where the entrance, the only entrance is here, that these are house-sized buildings which step down the hill, each one stepping below the other. And that our task really was to take this piece of ground in the middle and to reform it and to make a world of open space and building, but also spaces on top of buildings. And here you see very clearly where the ball court is on top of the internal hall, the hall for basketball, and the sense of how the buildings move up through the site, and the existing buildings step at angles to each other, and the new buildings thread through those. So from the street, this is the public entrance. This is its only face in a way at access street level. You come through a gap in the buildings, both of which belong to the school, and find the front door of the school beyond you with its canopy and its title. And if you're standing here and you were to look to the left, you would see right down the hill into the city. This section of the finished building, in fact, shows that we've made a number of bridges and connections, one here to connect the old convent and one here to connect the new science wing, which are the ways that we make the whole building connected and interconnected. So on a typical rainy day in Cork, you don't have to go outside, but at the same time, people can move under those connections to make their way right down through the site. And maybe this is the most important drawing that describes the idea of the building, which is the image in the middle is in a way the landscape, and it's about, the project could be said to be about building a landscape. So the entrance comes in at around the middle and onto a new terrain that we've made. And then from there, you go down a big wide flight of external steps to the lowest point, or then through a series of much smaller steps threading their way between and under buildings right up to the highest garden. And the drawing above shows with white the facades that are being retained of existing buildings, and in dotted all the demolishing. And then at the bottom, the new and old buildings together and how they relate to each other and to the spaces. So if you take the plan at the middle, the entry level, you come in the middle. What we found was that the old buildings tended to have rooms that were a good size for ordinary classrooms. And then the new buildings were where we put the very specialist rooms, like, for example, the PE hall to the south, which is very, very big space, and science labs and specialist rooms as we move up through the building are in the new buildings. And then the old houses take classrooms, which means the classrooms are different sizes and have different characters. And that's really interesting, I think, in the life of a school, that not everything is the same, that, you know, the pupils feel a sense, oh, now I'm in the bow window room, now I'm in the long room. And that's always the way the school was. So for us, it was really important that we would keep that sense of the character of the old school continuing into the new. If from the entrance level you were to look out to the left, you'd get this view over Cork City with the ball court in the foreground beyond the science wing. The circular windows there are lighting the staircase. And then when you come in at that entrance level, you arrive in the middle of the site, and the old building and the new building have a very narrow gap between them with a flight of stairs running up, which is very a kind of typical Cork City thing, these narrow slips with staircases in them, with slate hung gables. So here the stairs is coming up under the bridge above, past a slate hung gable, up to the upper level, and this is the top level of the building. So the stairs I just described would be coming up here in that gap, arriving into a courtyard. And in fact, this is the very top level of the building. A key challenge was identifying the lifts, and we did need to use two. And in fact, we felt very pleased we only needed two lifts in order to connect everything on the site. So there's one lift which is in the lower part beside the main entrance, which goes down to the hall and up through the science labs. And then there's another lift which starts higher up and connects all the rooms in what we call the arts wing. So at the top level, there's a wide corridor, which all the classrooms open onto, with more big windows looking out over a series of gardens. We've built a glazed bridge which connects the old nuns' convent house, which now has become a library in a sequence of interconnected rooms. And then at the very end of the sequence is the art room, which opens out into a courtyard garden overlooking the beautiful existing orchard, which we retained on the site. So that's the corridor with its big windows looking out over the garden, the bridge to the new library in the nuns' convent house, and then the art room at the top, which has its own roof lights, but also you can see through the window the view out to the old orchard, looking from outside in. And then the art room has an external space with sink before you get to the orchard proper. And from that level, if you looked back down the gap, you would see past the science block, which is the one that the roof of that is where the extract from the fume cupboards, etc., come out at the top there, across the sports hall to the city beyond. And then from the top, we built a new staircase against the old wall of the main house, and this stairs goes down, looking out over the city to eventually arrive right down at the bottom in a new world of concrete walls, which are retaining walls to the site where the sports hall is located. And the sports hall is a full-size basketball court with high-level windows, concrete structure. And the plan of that is that you will have arrived down. The lift is just here, bringing you down. You come down the stairs into the sports hall or into the dining hall, which uses one of the other existing buildings. And both of those open out on the south to a set of outdoor spaces so they can have theatre or events in summertime outside. The section through the sports hall here shows that the haunched concrete structure, the existing high school, now the dining hall with classrooms over, and this big flight of external steps, which in a way is one of the main external spaces in the school with the science wing behind. And for the annual beginning of school photograph, we've got all the girls just sitting on the steps or standing on the steps, which is, I suppose, a homage to the famous photograph of the Aldo Rossi School in Ticino. And just going back out to the first photograph, the image on the street. So behind that red wall is the school. And opposite it is this amazing blue house. And behind the wall, below the blue house, is a boys' school, oddly. So it's a kind of boys' school blue, girls' school pink. And the very time, the year 2016, when we finished St. Angela's, we were invited by Christian Brothers, who run the school across the road, to do a project for them, which is currently a tender stage. So in front of the blue house, you saw St. Angela's is in the foreground and Christian's is on this side. So we hope that in a few years' time, we will have two schools, a boys' school and a girls' school, facing each other on this remarkable terrain in Cork. Thanks.
Thank you so much. You were very proud of having only 2 lifts within the building. I was absolutely gobsmacked that you managed to do it. And I loved your analogies for the buildings. I think you made that both a hill town and a castle. And the fact that the school is so very hidden away. It's just so exciting, the idea of just going in and discovering it. Well, we've got, as I keep saying, lots to talk about, and now our opportunity is here. So I am going to invite all the speakers to come back now to join us on our panel, please. Hello, pleased to see you all here. One of the really interesting questions I had in was about circulation. I think what the questioner was asking about was the fact that whereas Gavin on his school was keen not to have any internal circulation, Nagar was talking about it as a really important thing to have. And perhaps we can just have a discussion. Is it always the right answer? Gavin?
Is it always the right answer? No, I mean, it depends who you're working with. We work very closely with the school. We were lucky enough to have the head who was going to run the school involved throughout the process, so that was quite helpful. The advantage, of course, is certainly in COVID times, and I will start from the start that we've done a lot of buildings, commercial and residential, with external circulation as well. So it's not just for a school. Downside is you walk outside. The upside is you have much more connection with nature, much more connection with the environment, and you gain net area and you build less. So inherently you're building less, so you're saving carbon straight away. It gets you natural ventilation because all your buildings connect to the outside, but it's not always the answer. No, it depends on the site.
Yeah, we did have one questioner who said, does it ever rain in Hackney? I think I know the answer to that.
Never,
Nagar,
no, never.
You were very keen on your internal circulation, weren't you? Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting seeing the other presentations and how there's lots of similarity, but circulation has been key on all of them. For us, it was partly the DDA issue in that some of the existing lifts are buried quite deep into existing buildings. So by allowing horizontal movement, it meant that we unlocked significant parts of the site. Also there, it is quite a compact site. We have over 1,000 secondary school boys moving very quickly between lessons. So operationally, the school found it a real challenge. They lost a lot of time, people coming in and out of every building. The existing stair course are quite tight and narrow, so put a lot of pressure on them. So it was partly to help with site logistics as well.
I've got some more questions, actually directly for you, but before I go to these, I'm going to go to Ian, because a couple of people are asking about the role of estates managers, exactly what they do and how they do it. And also, someone was saying, when you're looking at dealing with the roof, are you also looking at the rainwater goods and things on there? And is that therefore possible to start a move to saving and reusing rainwater?
Yeah, the estates management side of things is a bit of a strange one. I'm finding most estates managers for schools are either caretakers or a teacher, so they don't have a lot of knowledge on estates. I think that's going to change as trusts are getting bigger. Some of the bigger trusts that I'm dealing with now have sort of surveyors of their own, so I'm sort of, they rely on our specialism on the roofs, and we certainly look at the rainwater goods. We don't just look at that. I think anyone who's doing surveying will always look at windows and things that are going to interface with the roof, because we need to advise, you know, if they're going to do a large project and they've got large banks of windows that need changing or adjusting in height to allow for new thermal upgrades against the carbon. We look at that as well, and we advise the surveyor, we advise the client. It's not unusual for me, once we get to project start time, to have arranged for 4 or 5 other people, the specialists, come up with me to design a table scheme, to design the rainwater, windows, cladding. So it turns into quite a big site meeting, really.
And did you look at rainwater reuse?
Yeah, we don't personally. We sort of use that with, we're sort of limited to the existing schools, so we'd bring in a specialist for that. Unfortunately, we're generally dealing with older buildings that can't sort of take a blue roof, because we can't get the weight loadings. So yeah, we bring in one of the specialist partners at D&T really to look at that.
I'm going to go to Sheila. We've had a number of questions about your project, I think, because it's so fascinating. And perhaps I can just read you a few things together. I won't expect you to remember them all, but we can come back to the ones you miss. So one question is saying, lots of levels here. How did you decide which rooftop to develop as usable space? Someone else said, asked if you could say a bit about the fire strategy in this, I suppose, very enclosed school. And yes, and how does it work in terms of fire escape with just the single entrance? Yeah, it'd be nice to talk about those things.
Yeah.
So it's really to do with the roof, which
Yeah.
roof you went for, and how you deal with fire.
So thanks, Ruth. Interesting questions. In relation to the rooftops, in a sense, it kind of answered itself, because the existing buildings had pitched roofs, and you know, we kept those roofs in timber construction, and there was only one place, as I said, where the sports hall could be located, which was at the very bottom of the site. And because it was at the bottom of the site, its roof was therefore at the floor level of, it was about at or slightly below entrance level to the site. And it was a big space, and there was going to be a big structure, solid with big concrete beams. So in a sense, it was an obvious one. And so further up the site, it wouldn't have been possible to use the roofs, because either one wasn't opening onto the right level, or they were pitched roofs from the previous buildings. But it also meant, by using the biggest roof, that the school now has an outdoor play space, at least of a kind of small basketball size. When we first went to visit the school, and we were involved with them for a very long time, I don't know if anyone saw on the screen, we started to work in 1999, and the school opened in 2016. So it took a very long time. And in sometimes that's very good, because you get to know the client, the people, the students, etc. But the only sport they could play when we first met them was table tennis. So it was fantastic that they could now do outdoor sports and indoor sports properly. So I think that one, to some extent, about the rooftops, the building is like a big flight of steps, but as you go up through, there are other courtyards at existing ground levels, which we connect with steps, and sometimes you are on the roof of a small area, but you don't really notice that you are because it feels more like a courtyard. In relation to fire escape, a bit like accessibility, it was a really difficult puzzle to solve that. I showed a photograph of the street opposite the entrance side called Richmond Hill, and one of the old buildings does go down to that street level. It wouldn't have been suitable as an entrance because it only leads you into a small area and it doesn't have any kind of frontage, but it did mean, excuse me, that we could bring a fire escape down to that side. And there's one other place where beyond the sports hall you can get out onto a small lane, a little sort of private passage which goes down to the street. So we managed to find a number of escape routes from this very enclosed site in order to get people out safely. But it's kind of interesting that accessibility and fire, they become really important in the layout of the building. But then the answer, like about the two lifts, does give a kind of legibility to the organism of the building as well, that in solving what seem to be insurmountable problems, in a sense, it gives the building a kind of character that it mightn't have. It was more straightforward. I mean, I think it's just really interesting working on existing buildings and working on sites that seem very challenging, because you almost always end up with something extra because you can't give a standard response. You've got to give a special response.
I think that's right. Well, you certainly demonstrated that. And when you were talking about table tennis, I was thinking about Nagar and her really inadequate basketball area. But you obviously solved that. And somebody was asking actually how deep you had to go down for your sports area.
It is a huge space, and interesting to see that Sheila had the same issue on that site. So it goes down 12 metres internally and then a bit more substructure. We're quite lucky in that some of the existing buildings have basements, so we were managing to tap into those for some of the secondary support facilities that we needed for the sports hall, just to minimise the amount we had to dig in the ground.
And somebody else asked about the schedule of how the schedule of accommodation changed, if at all, to ensure that classrooms were grouped together and this continuous internal route. And they wondered if you actually lost any classroom space as a result.
We didn't actually, luckily. The brief went through quite a lot of evolution, a bit like St Angela's College. We started on the project in 2010, so a lot of evolution, a lot of refining with the school. Funding was a key challenge there, so lots of difficult decisions by the school in terms of prioritising facilities to make sure spaces worked. We were fortunate in that the existing buildings were quite generous. They just weren't very efficiently used. So we had big hall spaces with very small cellular rooms, not even classrooms, that couldn't be used effectively. So part of our work was tidying all that up and rationalising it and prioritising the specialist spaces that we absolutely needed to deliver.
I've got a question for Sophia. You talked a lot about durability, and it's really impressive to see projects where floors have lasted for such a long time. And obviously, environmentally, you want to do that in the future. I just wonder, when people actually move towards using so much colour, and especially the sort of patterned floors rather than the coloured stairs, do you talk to your clients and advise them about fashion, about the fact that they may be actually grasping at something which is fashionable and therefore by definition is going to be unfashionable in a few years' time?
Well, it really depends, actually, the brief that we get from our architects and specifiers. We know that depending on the use of the building, there's sometimes a shelf life to it. So we do a lot of work in, say, student accommodation, and we know that they are on a refurb program of about 7 to 10 years. So in those situations, it's not necessarily a consideration because we're changing and adapting. But generally, the products that we have and the products that our specifiers use, we're always thinking long term about something that isn't just going to be for the moment. Our designers we refresh our product ranges every 4 years. And what I find amazing is that we release stuff, and even though we've been planning and designing a new collection but not launching it for, say, 2 years, by the time it comes to launch, it's absolutely spot on with what the market demands and wants. So at the moment, there's a lot of interest in terrazzo flooring. There's a lot of interest in sort of Scandi look and feel. And these design trends are set to last a considerable length of time. So depending on the building's needs, we will always advise and support architects and designers, but generally they have in their own mind what they want to achieve, and the flooring can be as subtle or as bold as you want it to be, really.
And do you tend to work with people on the acoustic design as well? Because obviously there's the possible sound reflection from floors, isn't there?
Yeah, we can put an acoustic underlay to the bottom of our tiles. So then what you do is you're putting that into the building, and it reduces the need for an additional or a separate acoustic underlay. And that just helps with the sound transmissions. We have that specified a lot in multi-level and multi-occupancy projects.
And we all know that schools can be noisy places. We're talking about how a school actually works. I got a question here for Jay, which is, did the school have an idea of how they wanted the forests to be integrated with the school activities? Or was that something that arose through consultation with you? And if so, how?
It wasn't fixed because it was sitting outside of their core curriculum. So it wasn't prescribed in as such. And excuse me. The opportunity was such a rare occasion for the school to get quite a large area of forest. So what we did at the beginning is just helping them to understand a bit of a constraints. And obviously the school are far more aware of health and safety aspects of it and how to handle the situation arise with the students. But what we were able to aid them is how forests can be managed with the plants and the trees, and we also invited a forester in, and how all those activities can be part of the curriculum of looking at the more holistic sense of the land use. So the reason why our conversation actually took quite a long time, roughly 7-8 months, I think, if I remember correctly, is because the school was trying to figure out how they can use that new asset to the students' best benefit, I guess. So it's not really led by us, I wouldn't say, but we were just very fortunate to participate in that conversation.
And I also got a question about the later project, and somebody's asking how, I mean, it looks as if the things turned out really well, but somebody's asking how you managed to do that much work and be that prescriptive when you were only employed up to stage 2. It's obviously had a great result, but I guess the question really is, how could you afford to do it?
Well, I mean, by that time, we had a very long relationship with schools. So I've been turning up in their board meetings, and Sheila, the head teacher, can be very persuasive, asking us to helping them through. Because we're very small practice, and at the time of the procurement rule, kind of prohibited us to be involved in certain area of procurement system that are going through the council. So the school directly employed us, and we always have one charitable organization that we work with, and at that time it was school that we're working with. We didn't work for no money, but I think we worked at cost. But how the project evolved is after stage 2, there was a lot of conversation with offline conversation with a project architect on the other side of the fence, shall I say. It's just having personal relationship. Both are architects, and our concern is to provide the best facility to the school. So we had just had a meeting of minds.
So I think we'll interpret that as the question was, how could you afford to do it? And the answer is you couldn't, but you did it anyway, which is fantastic.
Close.
I've got another question here for Sophia on holistic design. It says, everything's considered at the same time, leaving nothing to chance. Who within your organisation has this overall view, and how has the flooring plan worked out with the architects and interior designers?
Well, we have a great team sitting behind us. So we obviously go out and talk to our architects and designers across the UK and Ireland about the projects that they're working on. We do try and get as involved as we can at an early stage so we can understand what else is going to be involved in the overall scheme and concept. And then sort of taking that away and back to Amtico, we have a great sort of services that we can offer in terms of CAD designs that can then sort of take the architect's drawings and put those into floor layout so that we can then work quite closely to see what works well, whether we need to think about directional zoning or breaking out certain spaces within a building. And then that will then be fed back. And then in terms of when we're getting to finishes stages, our products, we can provide sort of sample boards and larger piece samples that then get worked alongside maybe the furniture and the colour schemes and any sort of soft furnishings that are involved. So we can come in at the start and the whole scheme can be built around the floor, or we can be part of a collaborative process later down the stage, really.
I'm going to go back to Gavin. One of our questioners was really interested in what sort of interrelationship you had between the school and the residential building, beyond the fact that you obviously had the gates and you had the bicycle parking. And I think perhaps they're interested to see if there's any other synergy between the two. I mean, I don't know whether, for instance, the people in the residential may be able to use some of the school facilities out of ours, or how those two were designed with thought of each other.
It's interesting. Someone else asked that the other day on a different presentation, and was deriding the fact that they weren't more connected. It is only a primary school, so it's quite a small space. They're not particularly connected. I mean, they interface every day because the entrance to the houses is next to the school. But we've also had questions, people saying, isn't the school too noisy for people to live next to, which again is a bizarre reflection on society. The spaces can be used, and they do things like they have parents in to eat in their hall. So it's a fairly well used building. It's part of an academy trust rather than a part of the public built program, which restricts to a certain extent. But they are connected, but not specifically to, I would say, more to the community rather than just the people who live next door, which I would say is the right way round. I don't think it's not meant to be a sort of a citadel or a sort of keeping other people out. But they're a fairly equal, open bunch. But the school is designed so it's an internal space. So there's a connection, but it's not specifically to the people who live next door. But we've not had any. Equally, the question is normally the other way around. Don't the school dislike the housing dislike the school, which again hasn't been a problem. I think human beings actually can rub along quite nicely together.
Well, I think they can. And I think one thing that's been interesting is to see that all these schools, in a way, are quite inward looking. And it's certainly no bad thing, because they are creating the school as its microcosm of society. And then, of course, everyone goes out from school and goes back to their family and their town and everything else. Well, certainly on Gavin's project and on those two projects, working with those very interesting and complex old estates, we are seeing the schools looking inward. And of course, Jay was talking about the school actually completing its courtyard, which I think is, again, making it quite inward looking. And as I said, I have been there, and it's not in the loveliest of places. Thank goodness they've got that bit of forest now. But I think that has been fascinating insight, and I think it's been really useful as well to hear about those two crucial aspects of schools and school buildings, which are the roofs and the floors, and how much thought can and needs to go into both of them. So I think all it remains for me to do now is to thank all of our speakers, to thank the audience for both listening and for sending in such fantastic questions, and also just to say see you at the next one, and thank you all very much on behalf of Architecture Today and of the programme partners SIG and Amtico. Thank you.